Hey, folks, welcome to the Liberty United Show. I'm your host, Jacob Oakes. Hey, we're really excited for tonight. We've got two names that, if you follow current events in Utah and political scene, you're going to be familiar with these names. First, we have Chris Herrett, former legislator and has run for office for congressional seats. Chris, welcome. Appreciate you joining us. Love the shirt.
Well, thank you. Actually, I just came from fencing, so it was the first thing I saw. So I was all sweaty, just put it on. So I don't usually wear my own shirt, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, I'm wearing my own merch, so you just had to match the vibe. And we've got Chelsea Hope.
Hey, Jake.
Chelsea has done a lot of extensive research on some of the just behind the scenes corrupt things happening here in our state, and has appeared on podcasts like We Are the People. Tonight, we want to dive into something that, if you're driving around Utah, you'll notice that you're just seeing left and right these developments going up that I like to call stack and packs. They're like Cracker Jack box just stacked on top of each other on a small development space. And we're told that it's a benefit for us to provide affordable housing. Now, Chris and Chelsea, what could be wrong with providing us with smaller housing that's more affordable? Wouldn't that be a good thing? We need to get more people into homes.
Chris, I'll let you go first.
I'll be very honest up front. I do not like high density housing, but there's one thing I hate worse, and that's for my kids not to be able to afford a house. So, with some of my conservative friends, I might be a little bit on the outs in that I'm grateful. I actually bought my parents' home 20 years ago. We've got 0.8 acres here, which, I can grow a fair amount of food if I have to. I like it, but there's danger whenever you interfere with the market. And so if the goal is truly to make things affordable, that's good. If you want to control people, that's not good. And it's a lot easier to control people in high density housing. But the question is, how do you get, and I hope we spend a few minutes on how we got here, because how we got here was very predictable. A lot of us warned about this 20 years ago. And so hopefully we'll be able to talk about how we got here. The problem is once government makes a mistake, it is very difficult to correct. So anyway, like I said, I consider myself a constitutionalist, not a libertarian. I do believe there's some limited amount of space that the government should regulate things, but should do it very carefully. And I'm a little bit concerned that some of my conservative friends want to have government play a bigger role. So anyway, hopefully that made some sense. I don't think it made a whole lot of sense, but anyway.
Well, I think it makes sense. Let's have Chelsea touch on. You said you want to dive into how did we get here. Let's first talk about. We'll touch on that, all three of us, but let's talk even more. You brought up the point about. I think everybody could say if there's a way to provide affordable options, and we have options. You have a mansion, you have a small starter single family home, or you have a townhouse, whatever it may be. There's options in the market and people get to choose what they want. Great. Let's have a free market and have options and choice. Let people choose what they want. This is not really choice. I don't think the market necessarily asking for this type of housing. We want housing to be affordable, and the economy with inflation, the interest rates, things like that has just caused massive problems. But I don't think this type of housing, I don't think there's the demand they're saying there is in the market for this type of housing. And let's jump into how this could be a concern. Chelsea, you want to touch on a little more about high density housing, what it is, and how that could relate to smart cities and why this is potentially dangerous.
So, and I agree real quick, Jake, just a few things. I agree with Chris. I think this population growth narrative that they've used to push a lot of this development, they're saying that it's for future generations, right? For our kids and our grandkids, and we need this. Yet our own government websites across all agencies have put out documents that they've published themselves that our birth rates are declining. It's the population growth that's coming in. And again, Spencer Cox's and people like Celeste Malloy, right, are encouraging importing foreigners. It's been foreign population growth to fill basically the job sector. So there are concerns that housing is going to illegals. We've had issues with Trent Staggs, I think, is the one that really exposed that Utah has become a sanctuary state. But really, we have government at the state level forcing this on the cities, right? And so I agree that we don't want government regulation coming in. Government regulation is what caused this problem in the first place. And asking government just to continue to put Band-Aids, what we have is a bleeding wound that's infected, and we just keep asking legislation to put more Band-Aids on, right, that just cause the infection to get worse. So really what we need to do is repeal, right, is to undo what government's done, get government out. What they do is create public-private partnerships, right, which is partnerships between nonprofits, corporations, and government agencies for this development. And then the developers, basically, they're picking winners and losers. So it's not free market. It's the legislature is essentially through picking which developers and which corporations get to partner with government to build this housing out. They are maximizing profit for themselves. And a lot of the legislators actually are involved. They are developers themselves, right? So they'll give themselves the project. So they maximize profit for themselves with this high density. And then we're left to flip that bill. It eliminates, right, single family ownership, like Chris hit on. But you mentioned smart cities. So for those that don't understand what a smart city is, and I won't get into too much depth on the smart city. That's probably another conversation we can deep dive on another day.
Like for another episode to dive into that more.
Right. But essentially, we've partnered with the same corporations through these public-private partnerships and NGOs that are partnered with international organizations like the World Economic Forum, United Nations, if you've heard about them on the news, and same corporations that have partnered with China to build out their surveillance state. So really what a smart city is it's, all smart homes, it's the electric smart transit, your digital ID and your bank account, so these digital banking currencies, right? The CBDC all gets tied to basically your infrastructure. And they are setting up, and again, I have documents proving this. We can go through this on another episode, but they are setting up ESG or social credit scores like they have in China. And what happens is when government, through these partnerships, because now you have, essentially what you have through a public-private partnership is you have policing and financial power over the people within one partnership, right? So that's a lot of power to have. And so the Chinese government, if you're not complying with what government wants you to do, if you've not vaccinated, right? If you're taking your children in and confirming their transgender choices, whatever it is that the government wants you to comply with, they can shut you off to these privileges. So shut you off to travel through government-run mass transit. They can, in China, they locked people out of their smart home apartments with the keypads because they hadn't vaccinated. So
my understanding is in like Shanghai, there's certain requirements you have to report. There's a threshold number quota you have to turn in, reporting your neighbors on something like 10 a day or something. And you have to watch re-education videos or different things to earn points back to boost your social credit score to get access to even just basic amenities. But that's a topic for to go in even more depth. But the idea with smart housing is, or these smart developments, is that you're told it's this big convenience. You can have your they'll have office spaces, so your work, your shopping needs, your housing, and recreation can all be within walking distance, and you won't have to have a car, you won't have to travel. But this is when you centralize everything and you're restricting people, this is about control. That's what this is really about.
Right.
We are always sold things on safety or convenience, but it's about control. The high density housing, I want to say, Chris, I've heard that the illegal immigrants are getting access to a lot of the high density housing. What do you know on that?
Well, yeah, you know,
True?
I it is absolutely true. You know, the problem that you have, I've been fighting this issue. I don't think anybody's fought illegal immigration in the state more than I have over the last 20 years. Trent Staggs is a friend of mine, and we would have conversations about that. But for 20 years, I've fought it. And, you know, you just look at what happened. I've been involved in this industry for quite some time. 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, I had a real estate license. My first home that I sold in the 90s was in Linden, the expensive part of Linden, for $125,000. That was for the house. I still remember when Canberra went in Linden in the 90s, and everybody was astonished, couldn't believe the prices because the lots were $45,000. And then you know move to I put it in a subdivision up in Heber. I can't afford to buy land and do a subdivision anymore, but I bought land for $30,000 an acre in 2000 up in Heber, and we sold our lots for $50,000 a lot. And you know the problem that you had is that government thought that they knew best, and so they didn't want to have too many available lots. And so what happened is once you got behind, so cities restricted the number of lots that they could have in the city that hadn't been built on yet. Well, it doesn't take much to get behind it. And so all of a sudden, within 2 years, our lots in Heber went from 50,000 to 150. Now, unfortunately, we sold all our lots at 50,000 instead of the 150. But that's what happens when the government gets. But the issue is in, you know, when I was in the legislature from 2007 to 2012, we noticed that we were having a problem with illegal immigration. You had 90,000 illegal immigrants in 2011. Now you have reported 180,000. I think it's much higher than that.
Yeah.
But you just look at that, and you look at this. That's what they report. I think it's much worse. But there's a report that just came out that Utah is the only state that has increased in the last 10 years. The western state has increased in illegal immigration. And it is because we have sanctuary policies. We're the only Republican state that gives driver's licenses to illegal aliens. We're the only Republican state that gives in-state tuition. And so we shouldn't be surprised that we are the most unaffordable Republican state in the nation. We're third overall, only behind California and Hawaii for what we make to that. You talked a little bit about the World Economic Forum 5 years ago or 6 years ago when they made a prediction that by 2030 that most people would rent their home. I told people that it wasn't a prediction, it was a goal. And so you combined illegal immigration with shutting down the pandemic, the COVID pandemic. You know, government officials weren't very smart. You know, the same amount of people you can't make a decree by the government and say, hey, nobody can work. We're going to shut down trade. We're not going to bring lumber in. You can't do all these things. We didn't, you know, for a year, we didn't do anything basically, but the same amount of people graduated from college, all these people, and all of a sudden we were massively behind in the number of homes. And you know, I'm surprised at how many Americans don't understand basic economics. It's not like if you have a 1% undersupply that prices raised by 1%. In oil markets, if you have a 0.5% undersupply, you can see the market triple. And that's exactly what happens with homes, because homes are a necessity. People have to have shelter. And so we had an undersupply, and a lot of it, again, you go from 90,000 illegal immigrants to 180, just that amount of pressure can cause things to spike. And then you add other things, the COVID restrictions. And so that's what's happened is lots literally in my neighborhood. I'm in the home I grew up. So I've lived in this home for over 40 years. I bought this home 20 years ago for $225,000. It's now worth $900,000. Lots in our neighborhood now are going, a quarter acre lot is going for 600,000. A half acre lot is going for just sold for $1.1 million in our neighborhood.
Goodness.
A half acre lot. And when I grew up in this neighborhood, we had single moms, we had electricians, we had painters. Home was built in 1967. It's not like it was some fancy neighborhood, but nobody moves into my neighborhood that's not a two-income family or a professor at BYU or somewhere else. It is not the same environment that I grew up in. And yet, my home's no bigger. It's the same size, but it's become out of reach. And, it really comes back to the issue of control. What they've done with healthcare, everybody needs healthcare, so they took over the healthcare market. Well, they realized that there's one thing probably more important or more needed than even healthcare, and that's housing. And so that's why they've gotten involved in the housing market, or the World Economic Forum has predicted. Like I said, it's not prediction; it's a goal to have them people rent. Because if you own your own home, I can live in my home. I don't have it totally paid off, but I have enough equity. I could probably live off my home the rest of my life. Well, if you're getting a rent check from the government, how much are you willing to argue against the government? Not very much. And so that's why we've found ourselves here. But for me, it's just there's so many naive people that don't understand the consequences of illegal immigration. You bring in 20 million people, and it affected our housing market.
Yeah. The agenda, you will own nothing, eat bugs, and you'll love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, do you need anything more ridiculous for you to wake up? Chelsea, you and I were talking earlier. You mentioned that this is being pushed from the state down. Mm-hmm. So there's backdoor deals happening. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, I agree with both of you on as little regulation as possible. I laugh when I hear other conservatives on policies when they that the ultimate solution, like looking for some kind of political savior, rather than trying to get the government out of things. Every time we ask the to get involved in something, it only compounds the problem, not fix the problem. And you think the solution to bad government is more government? Am I understanding that correctly? The solution to bad government is more government? So I about deregulation. We need a free market. I don't think that the majority of people are actually asking to live in a Cracker Jack box stacked all on top of each other in this high density housing. There's issues, including the illegal immigration, the inflation. They've gone into this, but one of the biggest components is that our legislature is doing backdoor deals, playing favoritism with developers. And I'm for free market, but I'm not in favor of crony capitalism. The difference is when the government comes in, puts its thumb on the scales, that is crony capitalism. What can you share on that, Chelsea?
Right, and I would agree, and I would call it corporate fascism, to be honest.
I love that.
Yeah, so I mean, again, with these public-private partnerships, the bills, something that people need to understand about legislation, and Chris can probably attest to this, is the legislators don't really represent the people anymore. They represent the lobbyists. They represent corporations and these international lobbyists, and they don't even write their own bills, right? The lobbyists from these corporations that are pushing these agendas basically write the bills and the language for them, bring it in, and they run it. Public comments kind of just become theater, right? I know for a fact that they decide in caucus ahead of time what bills they're going to vote for, and they play these games of, if you don't vote for mine, I won't vote for yours, right? And they've decided ahead of time on what bills they're going to push through. So they're not listening to the people. They've passed legislation with GRAMA, which, for those who don't know what GRAMA is, it's basically Utah's version of the Freedom of Information Act, right? where we can request information. We're supposed to have transparency with what government is doing with our tax dollars and who they're doing business with. And, under the guise of protecting their privacy, they have made it impossible for us to get that information. They won't provide it when we ask for it. So yeah, what ends up happening is I come across this quite a bit, whether it's water, whether it's housing, whatever it is, where you see these conversations happening where it seems that they're going to pick a certain somebody for a development or a project. Legislation is passed where they don't name the NGO of who's going to be partnered with these development projects and these partnerships. And then after it passes, then they announce who the NGO is going to be, right? And so you start to see the same developers that get the projects everywhere statewide. And then the legislation at the state level passes laws that are basically forcing cities to put this in, right? They'll come into the city and basically say, well, we're going to withhold transport funding if you don't put high density in, right? So you're not going to be able to do any of your road transportation projects. So it is forced very much. It's been mandated by the state legislature, essentially, and the cities don't really have any recourse because they don't have the money to sue the legislature and the courts. And our referendum rights. So for those that don't know what a referendum is, when a city or county or state legislature passes legislation, if the citizens don't agree with it, they can basically do a referendum, get signatures from enough citizens so that the citizens can vote on it themselves to override that legislative decision, right? So if we want to override that in the city, we can if the city council votes for it. Well, cities started doing that. So Spencer Crocs came out recently and basically said, the cities are coming out and trying to do the right thing by putting these developments in that the state has told them that they have to put in. And it's making it harder for them to do the right thing because citizens are coming in and overriding it. So we're going to pass legislation basically that's going to make it harder for them to referendum. And they did. The passes bills that the governor wants passed all the time, which violate separation of powers, right? That's what a king is. That's what a dictator is. He makes his own laws and he can execute them, which is why our founding fathers separated those powers. But they legislation that the governor wants run all the time. So it is being enforced at the state level. And then you have the same lobbyists going to the city councils, giving presentations on why high density housing is the best option. But again, the cities that push back and try to fight for theirs in the city and don't want to put these developments in, they get reprimanded by the state.
We've our governor that says he has no clue. Smart city's a made-up thing. He has no clue what that is, and he doesn't know what smart city is. Then he turns around and goes, turns out had actually just previous to that, got paid to go give a big expensive lunch and presentation about smart cities. Our city is getting away with so much because the apathy of the people, but we want to bring awareness. What were you going to say, Chris?
Well, I just want to piggyback on a couple of things Celeste said. And I don't recognize the legislature. My last year was 2012, and something that happened after 2012 that did things fundamentally, and that was SB 54. Yeah. You are exactly right in that I'm kind of the poster boy of SB 54 because I'd be in Congress if it had not been for SB 54. And in 2017, I won the Republican convention. John Curtis got 9% of vote. I ended up with 55. But had gathered signatures, and so he's not in. But let me tell you why it shifted it. Because when I was a representative, I always had to worry about. I had about 100 delegates that I had to worry about, and I never knew who was going to be a delegate. And so I had to treat every citizen in my district as if they were going to be one of those 100. Now it doesn't matter. And so it is so much easier for legislators just to go to lobbyists, get $5,000, $10,000, and they don't have to worry about the individual. Where I could never do that because I had voted for vouchers, so the education establishment came after me. I always knew that I was going to have at least 33% of my delegates that were out to get me just because I believed in homeschooling, charter schools, private schools. I believed that people needed to have choice. So I couldn't afford to lose anybody. And so I had people, and I was responsive. So that is the single thing that has changed this. You look at it, everybody here, we agree that illegal immigration is a massive problem. And yet this last legislature, the Senate wouldn't even hear Trevor Lee's bill, who got taken, who's at least Representative Shepherd's bill got it. They wouldn't even hear it. They killed it outright. I would argue this is the one issue that's causing unaffordable housing, that the Senate wouldn't even hear it. And that's where we are. And the fact of the matter is, until we deal with that issue, it is just going to be those with money, the two newspapers that control, and the Desert News that are going to control the agenda. And so, people need to wake up. And I understand why people are apathetic, because I'm kind of apathetic now, in the sense that, I took everything I had to go to my caucus this last year, just because I know that it doesn't really listen to me anymore. Whereas that was so much different than when I was in the legislature.
So the of SB 54, I hear time and time again that every I them kind of put it out like a little treat dang or a carrot in front of the face, and they say, you passed this corrupt bill I want, and then maybe put on the floor repealing SB 54. I've been hearing this for a number of years now. Mm-hmm. It's all a game. They have no intention on it. Now, Chelsea, you mentioned grandma requests. Transparency is so in a republic, and especially it goes along with the First Amendment, the right to petition government. It's hard to petition your government when there's zero transparency. Another point I want to make is the says you should not be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. How are we're being deprived due process when they're putting their thumb on the scale and deciding for us without the people being aware of the process to decide for us how the market will build. I would say that this is actually the free market.
Again, they're winners and losers. And, one of the things with that is I don't know of any employer who would be okay with hiring an employee and giving them their card, their checkbook, and hey, go ahead and go make partnerships, do business deals for my business, and have the employee come back and say, okay, well, I will go decide who you're going to do business with, but you don't get to know who it is, and I'm using your money to do it. That's essentially what they're doing, right? They work for us. We're the employer, they're the employee, they're the public servant. They're using our tax funds to do business on our behalf. Yet it's all these secretive projects that, well, they need to be done under the guise of no transparency, under the guise of privacy, right? We have to keep their identity private in these public deals. And it's absolutely ridiculous that this has become just accepted, right? This is just now.
Well, and it is, and it comes from a lack of an understanding. And this is what you have done, tried to do, Jake, is to understand, my background's a little bit, I've a fair amount of time, my wife grew up in the Soviet Union. For me, the knowledge that socialism or populism or communism does not work. It's theoretical for me. I know it doesn't work. And yet a lot of people don't understand how dangerous communism or socialism is. And so they look for these handouts from the government, not realizing what it does. And so, the solution is, well, let's make it more affordable. Let's give everybody $20,000 for their first home. Well, the problem with that is I didn't get $20,000 for my first home. Jake didn't get his, or so, Celeste didn't either. And so what you've done basically is you've raised the price for homes by $20,000. You put more money into the market, and you know what we know with inflation basically is when you flood the market with excess money, prices raise it. And so they're doing all these things that are making people, what's the scripture, flax and cords, that people start to get bound in this. And so the solutions. Like, again, the number one solution, if you really wanted to change housing in the state of Utah, is to get rid of 180,000 people. Just imagine what would happen if all of a sudden that happened. Prices would decrease, housing would decrease. The reality is, too, is that you're not going to get single family homes until there is a glut of high density housing. And the way to get a glut of high density housing is to get rid of illegal immigration, because that that's where the majority of people go. A couple of years ago, I had a conversation with a mayor here in county, and she to me, she said, "Chris, I always thought you were a little bit tough on illegal immigration. But I just put my home, my basement apartment on the market, and within 2 days I got 300 applies, and 100 of them couldn't provide me a social security number." And it just lets you know, you now basically to be a college student here. I have kids in college. One that just graduated from BYU, but they're paying $2,000 a month for. Here's a college student that's married, that has a child that so needs a 2-bedroom apartment. They're basically paying $2,000. You could be making $30,000 just to pay your housing as a student in county, and that's sustainable, and that's why somebody, I can't remember if it was you, Jake, or Celeste, that mentioned that our rate now in Utah is 1.7. Yeah. My entire life. I moved from California in 1972 when I was 7, or I didn't move. My family moved, and I with them. But all my life, Utah has been the number one, had the highest birth rate in the nation. We are now number 9, and I would argue that housing has a great effect on that. You get, there's other reasons. You've got the scare that literally people think that they're doing the world a service by not having kids. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's and so
lab made meat.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it is. You look at China. What's going to happen to China? Fortunately, they the stupid one China policy, and they're going to pay the price in the next 5 years. I mean, China's still going to be a major threat, but they're have some social problems because of that. So it is dangerous when you get below 2.1 replacement level. But most of my life, we were 3, 4, for many years up until recently, 70% of our growth was internal, but that is not the case anymore. When you have less than 2.1, you're going to have growth from internal pressure. It's going to be from outside. But what really happens is you get in this circle, and this is the danger that Europe is in, this death spiral. Because what happens is, because of certain government policies, you look what is happening in Europe. Their rate is now down to 1.4, 1.5. So then you have the government elite say we need to bring more people in. So they bring more people in, which actually raises housing prices, and people have less kids. And so I really seen a news article by the Deseret News saying we need to bring more people into this country to the birth rate, which is just nonsense. It is suicidal. But most people don't understand that. Like I said, our prominent newspapers, the Trib and the Deseret News, do not understand this basic principle.
This is the fall of Rome was actually it was actually too much growth at one time, flooding people who
They let the Goths. They let the Goths in.
Did not acclimate to the culture. Yep. Rome lost its culture, and that was the fall of Rome. We are losing our culture in Utah, and anybody that that's because we're a red state that somehow
And
everything's
Jake,
all well.
we're not a red state. We're a Republican state, and you and I can have conversations about that.
Pretty angry
But
to follow
we
through,
are
no
not. We are not a Republican in name only state. We are
Right.
not a conservative. We are a purple state. Yes, we have predominantly Republican leaders, but we're not a conservative state. I guess I should
No.
say is
No,
that
we're not.
we are a purple state at this point.
We don't have a
I,
Republican Party here. It's a Rhino Party. That's what we have.
Yeah.
That's why Liberty United is not about politicians, a party. It is all about teaching people principles, because a politician's coming to save you. Folks, we love your support. Subscribe, share this. We'd love to invite both of you back sometime and go even more in depth on the immigration, go even more in depth on the World Economic Forum, Chelsea, and how right here in our backyard. I don't think people realize that Utah is the testing ground.
Yeah.
And I don't get a mistake where we keep seeing a pattern of major things. Utah was the first quote unquote red state to adopt ranked choice voting, and the list goes on. Anyway, I'd love to invite you back to discuss that as well. Just a quick thought, 30 seconds by each of you. What do you want the audience to take away?
Chris?
We'll start with Chelsea.
Oh, never mind, ladies first, I guess. Yeah, I would just kind of piggyback real quick off what Chris said. This taking of taxes to fund these initiatives, it's wealth, which is socialism, and that is the path that we are headed down. More government, not the answer. We need to get government out, and we need to reinstitute separation of powers. And I would argue also that the fight, I don't believe, is at the federal level. I think it's at the state level, and we really need to fight back.
Well,
City isn't local, right?
and first, I would like to apologize to Chelsea. I think I've mispronounced your name a number of times tonight.
Oh,
so sorry
you're
about
fine.
that.
You're totally fine.
But I would. The issue is people need to get involved. I mean, but until we get rid of SB 54, until we make people accountable, we're in an uphill battle, because there is so much money now in this state. There are so many special interests that it is very difficult to compete. And the system was the great equalizer to name recognition and to money. And until that changes, but I can guarantee that the only way that that's going to happen is what you're doing, Jake, is through education, because the too many newspapers have made the caucus be the elite system, when really the current system is the elite system, where it's money, backdoor deals. And like I said, it is, I have a good friend, I'll quickly, that he's in Washington, and, numerous works for departments, congressional people. And I saw him a number of years ago, and we were up on Capitol Hill, and he looked around, made sure nobody was there. And he says, Chris, my career, I've spent a lot of time in DC, and he says it is every bit as corrupt here in Utah as it is back in Washington, DC. And it's sad. The people that I worked with, 15, 20 years ago, everybody for the most part tried to do good, but now it is controlled by special interest, and it's absolutely frightening to me.
It's scary. And Chris, to your point on the education, that is why we have this platform. I sometimes called armchair philosopher by other conservative patriots. Thomas Jefferson said that to educate the masses, that is the only sure way to secure liberty. I go on and on with many quotes of founders that understood this concept. So you said nothing will change until we repeal SB 54, but it all comes back to the education. Why are people not speaking out against it? Because they don't understand why it's so crucial to have a representative form of government versus the direct democracy we're moving into with with the SB 54 in place, where just the person with the most money and can pay a bunch of canvassers to go collect signatures, and then to force primary, and then in a primary, the person with the most radio ads and billboards wins just because of name recognition. It's that is the representative form of government, and until you've studied the Constitution and why it's important to have a representative form of government, then some of these things might not make sense. But that's why we have this platform to help you. Folks, we really appreciate you joining. Chelsea, Chris, thank you for taking time. This is relevant thing to bring up right now, because I'm seeing developments go up left and right, and everyone thinks that we need affordable housing. We do want to make the market more affordable. I think everyone wants that, but we have to go about it the right way. And this is crony capitalism is not the solution. And we'll have more for you next time. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.